Hello everyone. I thought for this particular Something Bad Thursday, I would discuss a topic that is fairly familiar, I think, with a lot of moviegoers and people who enjoy filmmaking, in particular comedies. And this is Adam Sandler movies. Now, I'm not saying that all of Adam Sandler movies are bad or that some are enjoyable guilty pleasures. I'm not saying that he's a horrible actor, horrible this, horrible that. But I will say that there has been this pattern among people within the movie-going community who seem to recognize the fact that a lot of his films aren't as highly ranked. When you look at the Rotten Tomatoes list of all his movies, the only ones that have the tomato instead of the goopy green thing, I don't know what that's supposed to be, but I guess that means it's supposed to be sort of a flop. But his most highly ranked ones are Punch Drunk Love, The Wedding Singer, Happy Gilmore, Reign Over Me, and Funny People. Those are the most highly ranked out of all of his other movies, and all of his other movies have the green blob, which means that it's bad. At least according to critics. And the interesting thing about this ranking kind of system, and the fact that he only has these 5 movies that are considered to be okay, it's clearly established that that all of these movies, except one, all of the good movies that, according to Rotten Tomatoes, he's been in, he only wrote one, and that was Happy Gilmore, or he was involved within the writing. Again, there's multiple writers involved, but out of all of the good movies that Rotten Tomatoes puts him on, he only wrote one, and that was Happy Gilmore, and that was sort of, I think, within his earlier career. I almost want to say too that I heard he was a big influence for Saturday Night Live and the show, and I guess he sort of helped the show kind of relift itself when it wasn't at all that funny anymore. And I heard like him leaving gave a great impact among those who watched the show. But it seems like to me, from what I've looked at and from what I've seen out of his movies, and again, I haven't seen a whole lot of his films because usually I avoid seeing Adam Sandler films. Out of all of them, I would say a good chunk of them that are bad are ones that he wrote, or took part in the writing. And let me make that clear. He's never. I almost want to say he might have been the only one for Bucky Larson, but it seems like there still are other writers that come in there and mess with things. But it seems like Adam Sandler, the movies that are really, really bad, had him as part of the writing team in it. And these are the, I guess, major ones. I should probably just list them off for you. Jack and Jill, he wrote. Grown Ups 1 and 2, he wrote. 8 Crazy Nights, wrote. Bucky Larson, he wrote, and he wasn't even in it. Big Daddy, he wrote. Waterboy, he wrote. Don't Mess with the Zohan, wrote it. Billy Madison, wrote it. And Little Nicky, wrote it. 10 films that he took part in the writing in. And a lot of people consider those films to probably be his worst. And this fascinated me so much. And there are movies that he's in that I guess you could classify as bad. And he didn't take part in the writing in it. I know that there's some films that have that critique, but it seems like the ones that are bad and that a lot of people remember Adam Sandler being in are the ones that he wrote and took part in the writing in. And it really kind of does show. I mean, if you watch his films, you do kind of see that he is sort of responsible for how the movie is sort of executed, and how there's a lot of dumb humor at times, and that everything is pretty much either really grossed out, or like, for example, 8 Crazy Nights, you have the reindeer who poop all the time. You have the same thing with Grown Ups. I believe it was the first film where they all like peed in the pool or something, and then it came out like a blue color. Yeah, he's responsible for writing these kinds of things, and it just blows my mind. Really blows my mind that that if you look at a lot of his films, he was responsible for writing. And the thing is, I don't think Adam Sandler is a bad actor per se. I think, again, if he's given good material, he can make okay films. But once he starts tampering in with the writing, it almost seems like it really falls flat. And I think it just shows, like, look, the only film that got a good enough rating on Rotten Tomatoes is one that he took part in the writing, out of the 5. And then all of the other films that he's made, 10 of them he wrote, and they all ended up bad. Now, and this is all according to, I mean, this is not just Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, I've looked at other reviews and other insights, and it seems like the ones that I've listed off are the ones that people get the most angry at, or the most annoyed at. And yeah, pretty much all the 10 that I listed are the ones that people seem to really grind their gears on for whatever reason. Out of all of his films, the only one that I ever saw was, or actually 2 that I've seen. Click, which actually turned out a little bit depressing at points and kind of odd. I don't believe he wrote that one, actually. And I've seen The Wedding Singer. Only 2 that I think that I've seen of Adam Sandler. And I just feel like it just shows that that Adam Sandler is really not meant, I think, for writing. He's not meant for this kind of job. He's just, I feel like he should just act, and he shouldn't write anything. Because every time he goes in within the writing, it's almost like your movie gets knocked down another 10 points or something. I don't want to blame it just on him, obviously. I mean, I'm sure there are other writers who were involved who could have come up with something better, I'm sure. So it's not to say that those writers are to blame, but it seems like every time he goes in and does some writing, it automatically is like a death sentence to the movie, except for Happy Gilmore, the only one. And even Happy Gilmore, I think some people put as his lower best, which is still kind of odd, but still. And the interesting thing about Adam Sandler films, this is not only are some of them ranked really poorly, but it seems like even his good films aren't really ranked as high. I almost want to say the most that he'll get for film, at least I think for Rotten Tomatoes, was within the 60s. So I don't think he ever got a film that was like within the 70s or a little bit higher than that. Nothing. at all within his entire movie career. And I think that just says something. I don't know. I mean, I just feel like, as I've been looking through IMDb and I've been looking through Rotten Tomatoes, it seems like that they rank him the same way. Like, they put him in the 50s and 60s, and then put some of his other films, like, really lowly. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he just came in within the writing and wanted to make it his film. But that shouldn't really be the job of the actor. The job of the actor is not to create the movie, it's to create the performance of a character. That's what an actor's supposed to do, and I think that's really where Adam Sandler should stay. He should just be an actor and just do acting, and I kind of place him in the same category as Robin Williams, in that Robin Williams, chose some bad films. Again, the same like Adam Sandler, and he did not get involved in the writing. And I also think, though, too, a lot of it is due to the fact that he has been involved within the writing, that he has been involved with the script, he has been involved in trying to make the film his own, especially when he has his own company, Happy Madison. So, again, I think that just says something. At least to me it does, and I think Robin Williams fell in that sort of same trap. But I don't think Robin Williams really wrote anything. I think he stood to acting, but he just picked films that that I don't think he would be too proud of. And it's the same, I think, with Adam Sandler, in that he picks films. But again, they're films that probably he likes doing, because a lot of the films sort of resemble his kind of humor. And I think that's really the breaking point of what people see within Adam Sandler. Because on the one hand, there's those that enjoy his films for the fun and stupidity that they are, and there are other people who feel like he's really trying to insult the audience's intelligence. He's really trying to damper in and make them feel less, and just make the movie all that more painful. And I kind of agree with both aspects, but I think we have to look at it this way. There's always going to be people who like his style of humor and think it's funny. And there's a lot of people that are not going to like his humor and don't think that it's funny. So, ultimately, it kind of just depends on where you fall within this scheme of things when it comes to Adam Sandler movies. For me personally, I feel like, since I haven't seen a whole lot of his films, I can't make a complete judgment. But what I can make a judgment on is that I don't think he's really strong within the writing department. I don't think that he should be really a writer for filmmaking. And I don't think that he should take part in that creative process, because it seems like almost every time that he does, you get a more lower standard product. And you can clearly tell by the fact that he wrote Jack and Jill, and that he wrote Grown Ups 1 and 2, which are the ones that I think a lot of people like to attack the most. Really, I think shows. I mean, he's just not a writer. He's just not someone, I think, that's meant for that creative material. I just feel like, for me personally, I think if he just stayed to acting, it would have benefited his career a lot more than constantly trying to write. I mean, it's just, the writing of a film really is its foundation, and the fact that Adam Sandler was involved with the majority of his films that turned out to be bad, I think that just says something, And the films that he does end up choosing to partake in, even though he's not really part of the writing, sort of resemble already the humor and the things that he goes for. I think that's really clear, regardless of whether or not he's in the writing or not. But again, that's, I think, the reason why is it all comes down to, I think, the writing, in that he'll look at a script, and if he sees like poop and fart jokes and all this other Adam Sandler type-esque humor, he's gonna harp on that script and be in that movie. And if it's under his own company, he's obviously gonna want to make sure that it resembles him and that it resembles his humor. So I think that just says something. I mean, I don't know what other people think. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean to this man at all. I'm not saying that he's a horrible person, obviously not. I don't know the person. I haven't even seen a lot of his movies. But what I am saying is that I feel like from the evidence that I've pulled, I can make a judgment. And this judgment is that Adam Sandler does not belong in the writing. He does not belong in the creative process. He belongs as a performer. He does well at performing, and I think that is due to the fact that he can come off as really charming. Again, he's not one of the more attractive people within Hollywood, so that gives him something that's unique and that people can maybe identify with more. He has this way of trying to be happy and, give off that cheer up kind of attitude like Robin Williams does in a lot of his films, or even if they are bad. He does that kind of same shtick, and I think that it works for comedians and performers. And I feel like he should just stay to performing and to acting and should go by that route and stop trying to tamper in with the creative process and do a lot more of a range of filmmaking. I feel like he goes for comedy most of the time. With Robin Williams, it's sort of similar, but even Robin Williams kind of drifted away from that when he did Dead Poets Society. That wasn't really a comedy so much. I mean, there were maybe some laughable moments, but it wasn't really a comedy, and Adam Sandler goes for comedy all the time. And I think Punch Drunk Love and Reign Over Me were probably the only ones that kind of drifted from not being sort of a comedy and more into drama, I guess. And those films actually ended up working for him. So I almost want to say he's a good performer. I just don't think that he can write, and I just don't think that he should rely on and look at the creative process. He should look at just performing and having somebody who's good at casting pick the casting that he's in and the movies that he's in, or go through the casting process with him and just choose movies for him instead of him saying, yeah, I'm going to be in this movie because it's like my humor. And I think that really limits you as a performer. If you want to limit yourself to only one type of humor that really is one type of humor that goes on over and over and repeated in a lot of other films, then that shows that you don't have a lot of range and that you're not willing to step out of the box. And the thing is, I think he should try to step out of the box and work on being a performer and not being on a creative writer or expert, because to be honest, I don't think this man can write. I really don't. From seeing the reviews of other people and looking at a lot of his films, because again, I haven't seen a lot of his films. I've only seen reviews and such. It's really the writing, and I think it's the fact that he chooses bad writing, or movies that have bad writing in them, and he chooses films that or he makes films that have bad writing in them. So yeah, and then there's only these 5 little exceptions of movies where he's he just has this, he just kind of broke his tradition, because I felt like Wedding Singer was a little different from what he traditionally does. I think Happy Gilmore is probably a little bit more like Adam Sandler, but again, it still doesn't really bridge the gap into bad like the other Adam Sandler movies. Reign Over Me and again Punch Drunk Love are not necessarily the most uplifting. I even heard Funny People's not really a comedy, essentially, and the most highly ranked ones are the ones where he's not doing his normal shtick, and whenever he does his normal shtick, people don't like it for whatever reason. And I think that has to do with the fact that he took part in the creative process. He decided to choose films that reflect his humor and reflect his kind of writing and be in them. So yeah, I really don't know what else I can bring up regarding Adam Sandler. I mean, for me personally, I just think that he's just one of those things to come out of Hollywood that's interesting, even though he's interestingly bad most of the time, it seems like. It does feel like that a lot of the time he has this kind of shtick of being this childlike. I almost want to say a lot of his films come off as very childlike humor. I don't really know what goes on in his brain sometimes. I really don't. After seeing reviews of films and like looking at like what he does, I really don't get a lot of the time his humor, and I don't really see why these films are still, I mean, even some of the films that he's made that are bad have still become fairly popular, and I guess they're popular maybe for being bad, I'm not sure, but from a research standpoint, I feel that the majority of his films have been bad, and that's not just by my research, it's also by me looking at other people's reviews. By the films that I have seen, they're actually not bad. Like, I thought The Wedding Singer was actually really good, and even though Click was probably one of the lower ones, I didn't feel like it was downright insulting to my intelligence, but again, you kind of see a little bit that a lot of these movies that he does have sort of a similar kind of formula, and this formula is a similar kind of humor, and you will see this humor repeated over and over again. And I think a lot of these films, if you look at them, sometimes they're ridiculous, sometimes they're really over the top, and sometimes they're very grossed out humor, and really it was just random, like, why did you think that was funny kind of humor. And that's really not going to settle for a lot of people, and I understand why. It's very, it's just very lowbrow for a lot of people. But for some others, I'm sure that they feel that this is just the way Adam Sandler is, and they like this kind of humor. And for me, it just doesn't work, man. It just doesn't. I mean, I wish I could laugh sometimes, but it's hard for me, especially when he's involved within the creative process. Like, when I see a film that he actually wrote, it makes me want to stay away more from that film. But whereas if he's in a movie where he's just the star, I might be engaged or I might not be, depending on if I think the writing and creative process reflects onto his kind of style of writing and creative process. Again, a lot of the films that I think was in that were good were ones where it doesn't completely follow his humor, his formula. Like Punch Drunk Love does not really, I think, resemble anyway his his usual formula. Reign Over Me, obviously not funny people. I don't really think so. I almost want to say Funny People is probably more bridged upon Robin Williams territory, where they put in like kind of depressing elements. I think Funny People had some kind of depressing elements in it. And Happy Gilmore's probably the only one that kind of balances out Adam Sandler's humor with other creative aspects to the point where I guess it works. And then the others, I just don't know why. I just don't know how others can, I guess, like his humor, but I understand if you do. I understand if you like that kind of a thing. But for me personally, I just feel like it's just not funny. I just don't find it humorous. I just don't see a point in... I just feel like it's been repetitious. I would understand if he had maybe a couple of films that did this kind of humor that he does, but when you have already 10 that do pretty much the same thing that's been done to death, you kind of say to yourself, yeah, I really don't get it. I don't understand. I don't understand why it can engage so many people, but if it engages you, have fun. Go watch Adam Sandler movies. But for me, there's just a point where I just felt like that the more he strays away from what he likes, the more talented he becomes, which is kind of funny. When he goes away from that traditional Adam Sandler formula, I think he can be a lot more funnier and a lot more entertaining as a performer. And I think looking at Rotten Tomatoes and looking at other reviews, this kind of proves that point. But I'm sure there'll be others that will say, no, he's still funny, and no, he's good at this and that. Okay, he's a talented writer. Okay, you have the right to that opinion. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but for me, I feel like it's done the opposite for him. I don't think going into this kind of process has made him a better actor. I think it's really damaged. I almost want to say it almost destroyed his career. And if Jack and Jill can sweep the Razzies, sweep them. And he was part of the writing process. I think that says something. I think if he wrote the fact that he wrote Bucky Larson, and the fact that that's got zero, I think it was either IMDb or I can't really remember. It was either IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes. I can't remember, but it was scored really low, at least. And I don't want to say that there was a point where he was at his high tide and it's low. I almost want to say with Adam Sandler, it's kind of interesting because I think he actually started out as not being that good. I think Going Overboard, which I think was his first movie, that one, I think, that one was the one that got 0 on IMDb. Yeah. So he didn't start off all that well. And then he came exposed, I think, to SNL and such. And I think that's really the thing that launched his career, was the fact that he was on SNL. And then when he left and then started making his own movies, that's when we had maybe some ups and downs. I would say probably more downs. And I think at the same time, though, him making these kinds of other films that actually got a decent rating, just shows you that his career has not been always like it never really started low and went high, or started like high and went low. I feel like it's been kind of like but I just can't embrace his humor, his style of humor. I feel like whenever he strays away from it, he's the better for it. But that's just my personal opinion, and that's why I think Adam Sandler movies in general, you could argue as to whether or not they're so bad it's good, or you could argue whether or not they're so bad it's painful. But what I can say is that I feel that a lot of this bad, these bad elements come from, one, Adam Sandler's choice to participate in movies that really reflect his style of humor, and taking part in the creative and writing process to try and make the film resemble what he wants it to resemble. And ultimately, that's not what an actor should do. An actor should put on a performance and suck up whatever the writing is. So I just feel that whenever he sticks to this kind of formula, it destroys him. But whenever he goes off and does something different and something unique, then he's good. And then I think he can pull off a decent performance. But ultimately, I think that's really all I can say about Adam Sandler movies in general, is just I feel that's really the major reason. I really can't see any other problem. I mean, it also might be, too, that Adam Sandler's probably had influence from other writers. I've noticed this guy's name, Tim Hurtley? I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but he's been involved in a lot of the writing process along with Adam Sandler. I'm not saying that there aren't other people involved that should be put into note, but what I am saying is that Adam Sandler, as someone who's trying to be in charge, it shows that whenever he comes into this kind of creative process, it usually doesn't turn out well. Usually doesn't. But I think that's really ultimately all that I can say. Or even if he's not involved with the writing, he chooses films that sort of resemble that same kind of humor. But that's, I think, my final point. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them. Again, this is not to say that all his films are horrible. It's not to say that I don't enjoy some of them. It's just that I feel like that the reason for his movies being placed in this category of bad is because of the reasons that I've already mentioned. But ultimately, that's all I think I can say. Any questions, comments, concerns? More than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody,